Good morning, everybody. Listening to Hugh Hewitt, and he had Fred Barnes on, and they were discussing Governor DeSantis's wonderful initiative to have patriotic education in Florida. Among the things he mentioned were two things. One was that every student, in order to graduate high school in Florida, would have to pass the same type of test that someone who is trying to become an American citizen has to pass. In certain ways, I feel that, I've often heard it be said that there's a comparison between being Jewish and being an American citizen. You could either be born an American citizen or you become naturalized, and it takes a lot more work to be naturalized. And in the same way, you could be born Jewish or you could become naturalized. You could become a Ger Tzedek. And generally it takes a lot more work to be naturalized, to become a Ger Tzedek, than to be born into it. But nonetheless, on one hand, I do think a lot of Batei Din go above and beyond the requirements of Halacha, of Shulchan Aruch, and the Sugya of Gerus is a very simple one, and a lot of people are misinformed about how simple Gerus really is. A lot of people tend to put Gerus and Gittin together. Gittin is taka very, very complicated sugya. Gerus really isn't. It's a very simple one. It's amazing how the sugya of Gerus, of conversion to Judaism, is one of the few that you can find in halacha that is verbatim from Shas to the Rambam to the Shulchan Aruch. I would say 95% of the text is absolutely verbatim, word for word, from the Gemara in Yavamas to the Rambam in the Serebia to Shulchan Aruch in Yerdea. It's absolutely an amazing thing if one is familiar with how halacha generally works, with how Shulchan Aruch generally works, that you don't have something so clear cut. And the truth is, it is very simple sugya, and it's not as complicated, and you don't have to be the Rosh Kol B'nai Agoyla to become a ger, the way a lot of people think. And I remember myself thinking that. I remember in yeshiva telling people, why did you become a ger? You kept Sheva mitzvahs. You were perfect. How are you going to keep all this? When the truth, and then they taught us in yeshiva, it's just the opposite. It's almost impossible to keep Sheva mitzvahs. It's almost impossible to not be over on Gezel Pachas B'Shava Pruta. And it's much easier to keep Shabbos and Kashrus and Taras Mishpach and all those things that we keep than it is to not be over on an Isser, an Isser Misa, something one Chayev Misa, although there's a Machlokes in Rishonim what that means for in the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach, if it's an actual Chayev Misa, or if it means that the courts could theoretically bring ad v'ad b'chlal to Misa, but they could impose lesser judgments. So again, it's but certainly from the Rambam, and it would seem from a lot of Midrashim, Rashi, and so forth, brings that it would seem that this Chiyav Misa, that's all there is. But again, there are other Rishonim who disagree that the way that our society exists, that they impose lesser penalties for theft and so forth. That's within the purview of the courts to do so, and that's part of the mitzvah of dinim. That's lav davka, that they have to give capital punishment to anyone who steals a penny. But in any event, this comparison is quite interesting, but also this approach is as well think we mentioned before how the Pisetzner, Zechusi Aleinu, Hashem Yimkam Damai, wrote in his private diary when he turned 40 years old that as doch greit zu werden a ger, zu werden a Yid, he's ready to convert to Judaism. He's been a Rebbe, he was a Rebbe at a very young age. So he'd been a Rebbe, I think, for about 20 years at that point, and close to 20 years, 18 years, something like that. And he was ready to convert to Judaism. And we laugh at that, but it's not really funny. It's really serious. That's how we should all approach it. Meaning I know the way Rabbi Weinberger expresses himself. He had a Talmud who found out that his mother wasn't really Jewish, and he had to become a ger. And this Talmud, right away they were going to arrange he's going to go to the mikveh, but he knocked on his Rebbe's door and said, "Rebbe, I need to sleep here tonight because I don't know what I'm going to do on this one night that I'm not Jewish. I need to protect myself." And I'm sure there's a lot of people who, if they found out that they found out that they weren't Jewish, would never even think to convert. And then others who, at least, if they'll put it off a week or two and do what they think is enjoying themselves, which it's not, and then they'd be Megayer, maybe, And that's the type of question that really every frum Jew has to ask himself. If you found out tomorrow that you're not really Jewish, would you be Megayer? How would you approach that? And if you found that out, and your answer is not so clear, it's a problem. We should all, certainly frum people, should all feel so in love with Yiddishkeit that of course there'd be no question we'd jump in the mikveh right away. And we'd also say, like the Rambam says, if we're going to the mikveh regularly anyway, miloi tovel l'keria, miloi tovel l'nidaisa, we're already Eden, and just maybe, all right, maybe we need a bezdin to make sure, and I myself, because my father wasn't Jewish, I remember one time, I didn't have in mind really for gerus. I had in mind because the Ramah says that if someone is baptized, when they do tshuva from the baptism, they should go to the mikveh. And I said to Rosh Hashiva, I said, I go to the mikveh every day anyway. Does that count? And he said, you should probably have, next time you go to the mikveh, you should have 3 people, check it. Is that? Hi, Dave. How you doing? It's my old boss. Yeah. This is my old boss. I'm running late to work today. So we were saying about converting to this decision. Do you is it something you really want to do or not? Is it something every Jew who's already born Jewish should feel that same way of at least get to a point. It seems like Pisetzner was such a big tzaddik and did so many great things, and was aware of things in the world. He was a worldly person in addition to being a Hasidic Rebbe. He balanced that, but he was honest with himself enough that maybe there was some point in his heart that maybe this is too much for me, and he had to work on himself until he was 40 years old, that he finally felt this is for me. I found myself. This is what I want to do with my life. And it's a funny thing. It's an interesting thing. That many of us probably don't want that. And the thing is I think part of it is that we don't realize, we don't have to do everything that we do. I think that's also part of it. There's a part of the education of recognizing that a lot of the things we do in our Orthodox communities, which are wonderful and great, but they're chumras. The machmir tavel of bracha, and certainly we receive a bracha for being machmir. But the truth of the matter is, you don't. And I only eat food with a hechsher. Anything processed, obviously. I don't mean like an apple or orange, but I'm things that generally in our community we say you need a hechsher. I only eat with a hechsher a handful of things that I'll be lenient about. That if I call the factory and I know exactly what goes on there and all the details, there's one meat company that I'd like to give them a hechsher, actually, to be honest. And we like their mead, and we want to work on that and see what we can do. But I spoke to them and I ascertained that there's nothing treif that's at all in their brewery there. But and it's more of a common thing, I guess, among for a while I was only drinking alcohol with a hechsher on it, and then again, and I know one Hasidic Rebbe told me, that's how he conducts himself, and I've gotten lenient about that over the years. But Me'ikar Din, if you know that everything's kosher, and there's even the website from Rabbi Abadi. I think there's two different websites because there's a little bit of machlokes in the family there. Because I think one side is a little bit stricter than the other, where you send the ingredients list and they tell you if it's kosher or not. And a lot of people say, well, what if there's a small amount? No, such a thing as batul bashishim, and the thing is, and then they're lenient about certain things that other hashgachas are not going to give the hashgacha on gelatin and things. And again, everybody has their own chumras and everything, and I don't eat non-kosher source gelatin, but I say non-kosher source because it's kosher. Rav Avadia says that, even Rav Moshe says that. So it's and a lot of other poskim say that it can come from Hamish Davar Acher and it's kosher. But want to be machmir tavel of bracha, but you have to know, that if that really, if you wanted to, you could eat the Lucky Charms. It's not you're not doing a sin if you eat the Lucky Charms, right? But anyway, we don't eat it. The OU doesn't give a hechsher on it, so we don't eat it. Anyway, but I know people who do. I know Rabbanim who do. I know Talmidei Chachamim who eat it, and it's really nothing wrong with it. It's probably less of an isser to eat the Lucky Charms than certain questions on Chol of Stam is an actual isser d'Rabbanan. And again, even with that, you see in the Rishonim they explain what it means. Chol shechol v'Yaakov bein Yisrael ha'eu, and there's the idea Korea, and it's already in the Rambam. It's not even a lot of people say Chiddush of Rav Moshe, and I know that the Aruch HaShulchan predicted such a thing and was very upset about it. But the truth is, again, you have some Rishonim from the Rambam, so it's a complicated issue. Anyway, that's really the first part of what I was talking about. Is that not only should every frum Jew want to be a ger, but should really every Jew should know what it takes to be a ger. Should go through somewhat the ger's process, and also every Jew should go to the mikveh on a regular basis at some point in their life. Doesn't necessarily have to mean even if it's once a year, you should be going to mikveh, and that's part of it too. But anyway, but whatever tests are given typically to a ger from a bezdin, you should say you should give this to every Baal Tshuva certainly, and the Bali Tshuva probably should go to mikveh too, because we don't really know. There's not so much of a chazaka if your parents weren't from, your grandparents weren't from. Certainly, how do we know that you're really Jewish? So what's the shlech? It's a rein tanz in the mikveh. It's not the most difficult thing. So and certainly at least before you get married, that's that should be part of it anyway. And also there are achronim who hold and rishonim who hold that if your father wasn't Jewish and your mother was, you should also make a ger l'chumrah. So that was the thing. At the time, I didn't know that it was the shame of ger l'chumrah, but I remember I was talking to the Freiman Rav. I met him at the hospital. I was talking to him, and he told me that what I had done, that was by the Arizal's mikveh, probably is good enough. And for my mother, I had big yichus going back to the Chavis Yor and the Maharam in Prague, and another big tzaddik and Krulerov, Chengerov, big Talmid Chacham tzaddikim, Levi Yerushalmi was another tzaddikim, other gedolim. Anyway, it seems, I think Levi Yerushalmi was an Einik from the Shlach Kodesh. I haven't found the exact yichus to the Shlach Kodesh, but it seems also from the Shlach Kodesh. The Shlach Kodesh had a lot of children, a lot of Einik, so I think most people in Europe have somewhere in their yichus. I don't only mean Jewish people. Somewhere in their yichus the Shlach Kodesh. Anyway, the other thing that they said there was that Governor DeSantis wants to have educating about the evils of communism and totalitarian regimes, and why is it that somebody would leave Cuba or Vietnam or somewhere at risking their lives, going through shark-infested waters, to come to America to escape the evils of communism. And he said he wants to bring speakers to every school, just like we have the Holocaust survivors who go and speak in schools. They should have communism survivors. He didn't compare it to Holocaust survivors.